Well, great to be in Pensacola. We were here 2 weeks ago with our Garcon Point Bridge announcement over next door, and we were happy to be able to reduce the tolls there. I know a lot of people in these communities really appreciate that. I also want to thank Escambia County Sheriff Chip Simmons for having us. I also want to thank Dane Eagle from the Department of Economic Opportunity. Of course, we have Senator Broxson, Representative Alex Andrade here. I think we have some county commissioners from Escambia County. Welcome you, and then obviously a lot of the officers that are sitting here with us today. We, during the last legislative session, I thought it was important, particularly given the last year and a half, the way a lot of, quite frankly, law enforcement were treated very poorly throughout the country, that we showed our appreciation here in the state of Florida for the folks that wore the uniform. So I proposed that we do $1,000 bonuses for all sworn law enforcement officers in the state of Florida. That's almost 50,000 people, as well as fire and EMTs, our first responders. And so we thought it was a good idea. We were hoping to get the support for it, and we were able to get it through the legislature. And I signed the bill into law. I signed the bill with the budget into law in June. And so then that made it a reality, but then we had to actually do it from the administrative perspective. So I told Dane Eagle, I was like, we got to get these checks out. It's not like we just have all these names sitting around in the state of Florida in the one database. We had to like get the sheriff's departments, the police departments, everyone to send in. So we were able to do that. And then now we'll obviously be handing out checks here. A lot of people will be getting them in the mail this week and next week. And we're really excited about that. This morning we were down in Surfside with the Task Force 1 and 2 from the City of Miami and the Miami-Dade County Fire Departments. And we did this prior to that happening, obviously. We had signed the budget in early June, but we knew when we did that when something happens, you have folks who are expected to show up, and it's the people wearing the uniform. And the Surfside is an example. You know, they were there saving people right away. And then as those initial folks were saved, you had a big pile of rubble. And it was unlike anything I've ever seen. And they worked tirelessly going through that, for trying to find any sign of life. And they put their heart and souls into that. And it was a very, very emotional duty. It was very trying. You know, there was one example. There was a firefighter who volunteered to help the task force. The guy's daughter was in Champlain Towers. And so they actually, when they found her remains, they did a impromptu memorial there. And so these are the types of things where, you know, it takes a toll, and they really did a great job. So we were happy to be able to be there with them. We were also in Jacksonville earlier today with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, and they've obviously got a lot on their hands and have worked very, very hard. And we're really happy to be here in Pensacola with the Escambia County Sheriff's Department. You know, the last year and a half, police officers and folks who wear the uniform, you really can't do that on Zoom. You got to be out there. You got to be responding, and they did that. They assisted with a whole host of issues, even beyond their typical bailiwick, and particularly involving the coronavirus relief efforts. And so I think that they've really been leaders in these communities. I recently heard about the Sheriff's Blazer Academy. And it seems like a really good idea. They'll be mentoring young men ages 13 to 15, building their confidence and teaching them responsibility and respect. And the fact that this program is funded by seized drug money makes it even better, because they're putting that money to good use. And so stopping the drug dealers now and using the money to hopefully deprive them of future clients is really a 1-2 punch. In addition to creating programs to help support their community, deputies work tirelessly to keep the citizens of Escambia County safe. Standing with us today, we have investigators Jake Bandersky and Christy Tatum. On May 18th of this year, these two deputies assisted their major crimes unit in the investigation of the attempted kidnapping of an 11-year-old girl. The girl was waiting at her bus stop when a man grabbed her in broad daylight, attempting to kidnap her. Luckily, she was able to break free and run home, but the assailant was still on the loose. Both investigators canvassed the scene, collected surveillance video, and helped piece together information that led to the arrest of 30-year-old Jared Paul Stenga for this horrific crime. They were able to get a predator off the streets, and we thank them for it. So thank you guys for your hard work.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks so much. Yep. So we, do the bonuses. They're well deserved. It's also our way just to say thank you. If you look around the country, in a lot of law enforcement agencies, morale is at an all-time low. And I know you have people coming from other states. They want to get to Florida, and I'm not saying that we've solved every problem here, but I think that through this effort and other things we've done, folks that know wear the uniform know Florida stands behind them, and that we support the men and women of law enforcement. I want to thank the First Lady who's here. She's going to say a few things, and then we'll hear from some of our other speakers. I think we've got Dane Eagle to hand out some checks, and I think we've also got, who else is going to, so Dane will come out here, give some remarks, then we'll hand out the checks. So
to that end, I'll be super fast. I just really wanted to come with Madison today just to say thank you, really, for all that you do to serve and protect. We were with some first responders earlier today, and just so you all know, this is very special for us because we're very fortunate to live in the governor's mansion. And just about 4 blocks from the mansion, there is a fire station. And whenever we hear the sirens go by, the kids always perk up and they always say, "There goes our firefighter friends," and there they go to the rescue. And so it's really neat that we've had the opportunity to take them to that fire station, to learn a little bit about what they do, but then the opportunity to be First Lady, to be able to see, obviously, as the governor mentioned in Surfside, the selfless sacrifice that everybody puts forth is very meaningful. And that's one of the reasons why we're working with the Department of Children and Families. We're also working with our legislative partners and our federal partners to look at some of these block grants to see if there's a way that we can use and utilize some of that money to be able to help our first responders specifically about and with their emotional well-being. Because when you're serving and sacrificing, that often, as the governor says, comes with a toll, an emotional toll. And so we've found in a lot of roundtables and very candid conversations with first responders that one of the things that is the most meaningful is being able to have that outlet with a peer, somebody who has that relatable experience. And so we're looking for those opportunities with pre-existing funding and working with our partners to be able to maximize that so that we're helping those who help us on a daily basis. So really, we want to be here. And as soon as Madison found out that we were going to go say thank you to police and first responders, I said, "Madison, do you want to go?" And she goes, "Yes." And so she wanted to come and hand out some checks. So thank you for what you do, and thank you for your service.
all right, Dane.
Well, thank you all for being here today, and really thank you to the governor and the First Lady, the First Family, really, Madison here as well, for prioritizing first responders across the entire state. This was a priority of the governor this last legislative session, and ensuring that our first responders, our policemen and women, firefighters, EMS are recognized for what they had to do through COVID, and even beyond that. It was a tough year for all of them, and for our legislature for stepping up and answering the call. Senator Brox and Representative Andrade, 2 great guys I got to serve with. It's really amazing to see that kind of service in Florida. Department of Economic Opportunity was just privileged and honored to help carry out the governor's vision in coordinating with the various offices, sheriff's offices, police, EMT, fire across the state to get these checks out in a meaningful and efficient manner. And here we are today just recognizing some of the cream of the crop. Governor and First Lady could have gone anywhere in the state today. They picked 3 locations and they wanted to be in Pensacola. So here we are. Without further ado, we'll get started. And as we call your name, please come up, and the governor and the sheriff.
What are we going to do right here?
I think that's a great spot for it. And we'll start with the 2 the governor recognized. Deputy Sheriff Jake Bandersky. Deputy Sheriff Christy Tatum. Deputy Sheriff K-9 Matthew Beatty. Deputy Sheriff First Class Romaine Brissett. Deputy Sheriff Sheila Cheeks. Sergeant Peter Gallion. Deputy Sheriff Jeremy Horn. Sergeant Shedrick Johnson. Sergeant Peter Kamawi. Deputy Sheriff K-9 Megan Kearns. Deputy Sheriff Bobby Kiersey. Deputy Sheriff Raven McGee. Deputy Sheriff First Class Joan Savage. Deputy Sheriff Brandon Schuler. Deputy Sheriff On Thatch. Deputy Sheriff Olivia Washington. And Deputy Sheriff First Class Michael Williams.
Did we leave out the sheriff, or is he getting his too?
It's my checks in the mail.
Okay, okay. Yeah, so we'll end up, people that didn't get them today, they may have already gotten them in the mail, or we will be getting, they'll be arriving pretty soon, so either this week or next week. And that's also true with the principal and teacher bonuses. Those should be arriving this week and into next week. So we're happy to be able to do that. And we're going to look to do more for law enforcement. I think coming up in the next year, I have some initiatives we'll probably be rolling out pretty soon. I think it's important that that we maintain this as a profession that's going to attract good people. And there's a lot of things that go into that, morale, some others, but I mean, we do want them to be able to make a decent living. And so it's important. We're looking at our state agencies, what we can do with some of those state law enforcement in terms of making sure that they're compensated better. So we'll have probably a flurry of proposals on that, but we do think it's important. I know we've had from some of these other departments across the country where they've been treated very poorly. I mean, I know we've had people come down to Florida and sign up with some of these other departments, and so I think that the fact that we're a state that really welcomes the good law enforcement, I think is very, very important. Okay, with that, yes, sir.
Mr. Governor, earlier today, Press Secretary Psaki said that if state superintendents that violated the state mandate for mask mandates did not receive their salaries as you indicated, that the federal government would intervene and pay those people. What do you make of that? What's your reaction? And do you think the federal government is perhaps intervening in Florida State's COVID policy?
I think that they really believe government should rule over the parents' decisions, and I think the parents' decisions in this regard should ultimately be what is done. The fact of the matter is the parents are in the best position to know what's best for their kids. There was I think Anthony Fauci was on a radio program yesterday. He said, we don't know if it's harmful. We haven't studied it. We hope it's not. Well, there's a lot of parents that don't want their young kids to necessarily be sitting there for 8 hours, particularly the kindergartners, the first graders, the second graders. So we believe in empowering the parents. They obviously want the government to force and to use coercion. Our policy based on the Parents' Bill of Rights is this is the parents' decision under Florida law at this point. Now this is a new law that was just signed. It wasn't necessarily in effect last year. So we're in a situation now where we believe that the parents' rights will be vindicated, and we'll work to make sure that that happens in any way we can. But the idea that the federal government would get involved in that, I think obviously would be very inappropriate.
Governor.
Yes.
Welcome again.
Yep.
Pensacola, good to see you. Here's a line from your executive order. Studies have shown that children are at a low risk of contracting a serious illness due to COVID-19 and do not play a significant role in the spread of the virus. But here in Northwest Florida, Governor, right now there are children in area hospitals who have COVID. We have confirmed it. We know some of those kids right now are on ventilators. So given that, what can you say to parents as school starts this week here about keeping kids safe from COVID in schools?
Everything in that is 100% true. They are at low risk. If you look at the whole pandemic, however many people were hospitalized in the state of Florida at any given time, between 1.1 and 1.4% of that were children. So the overwhelming majority, 98+%. Right now, it's 1.3% of all the hospitalizations. Now, what I would also say is we've had a wave of RSV throughout the country. That is putting more kids in the hospital than COVID. That's a very significant risk, much more riskier than COVID. I would also say, based on surveys of hospitals, between 25 and 40% of all COVID-positive pediatric patients are incidentally positive. In other words, they're being treated for something other than COVID, and they're in and happen to test positive because they test everyone that goes through. So there's not been any change in how this impacts kids. It doesn't mean that theoretically it can't. And I think if you look throughout the country, if you look at the under 18 kids who have died with COVID, the vast majority of those had really, really significant health issues. You have people that have leukemia, you have people that have really sad things, and it's a tragic situation. But the notion, and then we went through this last year with the schools. When we pushed open schools, people said that this was going to be something that was going to be very problematic for kids. It turned out that that was not the case. And actually, the schools, they're less likely to get it in school, believe it or not, than at home. And the reason is because what that statement said is also verified. You have very few instances of a student infecting an adult. It's almost always the adult infecting the minor. And that's been true throughout the whole pandemic. We haven't really seen any changes to that. And so, I would tell parents, I mean, obviously, you know your kids. That's what the whole thing with the parents making the choice on the masks. And so I think each one's going to be different in terms of how they look at stuff. But I can tell you, we've not seen any material change in how this works. Now, obviously, we have more people hospitalized today that are COVID positive than we did 6 weeks ago. I mean, we're in the midst of a wave. And so you're going to see more of every age group, but the percentage of minors has not increased with Delta or with this thing. And I think that that's interesting because if you think about it, we have 80% of 50 and over that are vaccinated in Florida. And that's the group that has the highest percentage of hospitalizations typically. So you would think that potentially the kids would make up more of a percentage because they're obviously not eligible for the vaccine, but they're still about 1.3%. And here's something else. An unvaccinated kindergartner is at less risk for COVID than a vaccinated 30-year-old staff member. And that's been true in the day. Now, the 30-year-old staff member is low risk and for serious illness as well once they're vaccinated. So I think that we had a great school year. I think we'll do it again. This wave last summer, we peaked earlier in July. Now we're into August, and so it's running up more in the school year. But at the same time, I mean, I think that kids have been out doing a bunch of stuff the whole time anyways. And so I think it is not a kid's disease, fortunately. It doesn't mean you can't find one example, but I would say in almost all of those examples, there's usually other aggravating factors that are present. And certainly for pediatrics, I think the RSV wave has been much more threatening to minors than the COVID has.
Governor, the CDC have reported more than 28,000 new COVID cases on Sunday, but the Florida Department of Health reports there were 15,000. Can you, Governor, possibly speak to the disparity?
Yeah, it's an easy mistake, yes. So what happens is CDC doesn't report on the weekends. So the state of Florida provided 3 days worth of test results to them on Monday, and that's for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So those would have been reported Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And the CDC, instead of what they normally do, is they just take the total, divide it by 3, and put it in. Instead of dividing by 3, they just put it under 2 days. And so technically, they have 0 cases in Florida for Monday, and then they had whatever they did for Saturday, Sunday. So they should have put it out over 3 days. They put it out over 2. I know the Department of Health has reached out to them. I don't know if they've corrected it since then, but that's all it was. It was just the way they're reporting it. They didn't do it over the 3 days when that was 3 days worth of test results.
Governor, are your health professionals telling you that your health advisors, whoever they might be, obviously from the state, that this surge is going to end, or at least the numbers are going to decrease in the next month?
No, I think for sure. I mean, if you look, so we have a big state, as you know. So the wave didn't start at the same time throughout the whole state. So, for example, the wave started in Northeast Florida. Their indicators in terms of their RT value is now below 1. They have a decline, 7-day average decline of 18% in cases. And they have a decline in COVID, ED visits for COVID-like illnesses. You have the Panhandle. You didn't necessarily start increasing the same time, but it's a similar cycle. And I think most people think that you're going to see not just Florida, but you'll see the Sun Belt throughout, because it's not just Florida. I mean, if you watch certain news channels, you think Florida was the only state that had any type. But I mean, you look at some of these other Sun Belt states, Deep South, and I think you're going to see it. I think you'll see it roll over for sure. When they do these waves, it's a very repeatable pattern. And Michael Levitt, as a professor at Stanford Medical, he identified this pattern like a year and a half ago. When you start to see these increases, they go and then they accelerate, and then you'll have the growth will slow, and then it'll kind of go into a holding pattern, a plateau, and then it starts to recede. Now, the one thing we saw with Great Britain was they had a huge upswing and then a huge downswing very rapidly with Delta. And the question is that unique to Great Britain, or is that how Delta, there was a huge downswing in India too, because Delta came from India. So we're looking at that, and hopefully we see it recede very quickly. I would note, because there's some people who say, oh, well, shut down, do all that, which we're not doing. Great Britain, they did their Freedom Day like right when they hit the peak over the summer, and it just fell off a cliff ever since they got rid of all those things. And so I think it shows that these things have a very powerful life cycle, and we're seeing the indicators. And I think you will see, not just in Florida, I think all the states that have had the increases. And then what's going to happen is, and this will blow up narratives, but as the seasons change, you're going to start to see these patterns emerge in the Midwest and in the Northeast. And I think it'll be very repeatable, and I think it'll be very similar to what we saw last year, maybe even with some of these cases, because Delta, it's an aerosolized virus, it's very transmissible, and it's not something like the things like social distancing. I mean, it doesn't matter because it's just in the air. And so I think you're going to see that, but I think you'll see similar patterns. What we have seen in Florida in terms of the hospital census, if you talk to pretty much every single hospital executive I've spoke to, chief medical officers, they will tell you that the senior population that's heavily vaccinated is not showing up in the hospitals like they did last summer, because the vaccine has reduced their chance to be seriously ill. So you don't have massive numbers of nursing home residents. You don't have a lot of 70-year-olds. I mean, you have some because there's other ailments that happen and you can still be positive, but that's not driving it. And so that's an indication that focusing on those vulnerable people has worked in terms of reducing severity. But and what they typically see is the folks who end up hospitalized, and particularly those who end up going to intensive care, tend to be people who either haven't had immunity from a prior infection or have not had any vaccination. What I would tell folks, and a lot of people don't know about this, which I think is kind of should have been, everyone should know this. If you do get infected, particularly if you're higher risk, they have monoclonal antibody treatments that if you get it, it's an IV treatment. If you get it early, the chance of you being hospitalized is very, very small. And it's worked very well throughout the state. The only issue's is not everybody knows about it. And what happens is you're somebody that's higher risk and you get infected and you don't necessarily feel that bad. The incentive is kind of like, well, you know what? I think I'm going to be fine. What happens, though, is that once the virus progresses and it becomes more serious, the monoclonal antibody at that point is not likely to reverse it. If you get it early, I mean, it really nukes it. People's symptoms are resolved relatively quickly. It's kind of the closest thing we have to a cure. You just have to do it at the very beginning of the infection cycle. And so that's what we're trying to tell people is, okay, if you get infected, talk to your doctor immediately and ask about whether the monoclonal antibody treatment, it's one of them is Regeneron, which President Trump used when that was still under experimental use then. He used it, and he's told me personally that totally cleared everything up. You got to go by data, and the data's strong on this, and so anecdotes you got to take with a grain of salt. But it is striking to me, 100% of the people that I know that have gotten monoclonal antibodies have said that it completely resolved their COVID infection within 48 hours. So that's the message for folks. I mean, obviously, we have now in Florida, we have over 80% of the 50-plus population that's been vaccinated. That has helped reduce illness. Now, it doesn't do what we hope in terms of creating herd immunity. People are still testing positive who are vaccinated. It's usually a very mild case. They're not being hospitalized in large numbers, but it's not necessarily preventing the spread like we hoped that would do. And people are looking at that. I've talked to to folks, places like Stanford and Harvard, and they said that they think that the monoclonal or the vaccines probably do reduce your likelihood of being infected and spreading it for about 3 months pretty dramatically, but then after that, it's a little easier for you to catch it. And that, again, these are not serious cases, but if you're counting cases, and if that's what people are fixated on, just know that you will continue to see cases even as the vaccinations go. I think it's also important to point out, there's a narrative saying that somehow that increased cases are tied to how high the vaccination rates are. Florida, we have the highest vaccination rate in the Southeast. We're 22 out of 51. So it's not like we're a little bit above average nationwide. And then with seniors and 50 plus, we've got over 80% of 50 plus. You have places like Israel that are the most vaccinated country. It's one of the most vaccinated countries in the world. They're having huge surges right now, probably similar on a per capita basis to what Florida has seen over the last couple of weeks. You look at some areas like Iceland, it's like almost 90% vaccinated. They're having huge increases. And so the cases and kind of some of these spikes, the vaccinations are not necessarily preventing that. Now, I do think they're helping to prevent serious illness, but people just need to know that that's kind of what the use of them is for. And if they have a belief that, well, if more people got vaccinated, then COVID would go away. That is, I think at this point, we know that will not happen. I mean, it will continue to circulate, and even people like me who are vaccinated, I'm going to I probably have come in contact with it, but I mean, I've never tested positive, but if I come in contact with it, I potentially could get a very mild infection, and then that helps build the immunity. But that's the way this is going to play out. It's not going to play out. I know some of these folks in DC have said, once we have, people that are on TV all the time said, once we have 50% vaccinated, COVID will just go away. That's obviously not true, because we have 50% nationally vaccinated, and we still see. So that's just what we're dealing with. But at the end of the day, I think we have the tools between the vaccinations and the monoclonal antibodies to be able to take COVID from something that was certainly more risky for elderly people in particular than the typical respiratory virus, and take that and really make it a flu level risk for most people. And that's kind of the direction that we're going. Okay, well, I gotta run and get back to Tallahassee, but thank you all for coming, and we really appreciate everything that the Escambia County Sheriff's Department and everyone here does for us. Thank you.
How you doing? See you doing all right?